Probably one of the largest expenses that you're ever going to make as a photographer is your lenses. You could have one of the best cameras in the world or on the market, but if your lens isn't of the best of quality, then your images can suffer. So what is the best lens for wildlife photography? Well, it's quite a subjective question, and it can have a number of answers. I suppose the simple answer is that there really isn't one overall best lens for wildlife photography. It all depends on what your subject is, how far away your subject is, the conditions at the time, the quality of light. Those are the things that are going to determine the type of lens that you need to get the job done. There are two main attributes to a lens. That's the aperture and the focal length. I'm not going to go into detail about the aperture. I covered that in a previous video on the exposure triangle, and I'm going to assume that you understand the basics of the exposure triangle. What I want to do in this video is I want to set out the choices you have when you're going about choosing a lens for wildlife photography. And what we'll do, we'll look at the different types of lenses, we'll look at focal lengths, we'll look at the settings, I'll talk a little bit about teleconverters, and I'll give you some top tips along the way. I think it's important to understand how we use our vision in combination with a lens in order to get the images that we're after. A human being's field of view is approximately 120 degrees. Compared to the likes of an eagle, 200 degrees, and a deer, 220 degrees, which tells us straight away that wildlife have a far superior eyesight than we do. Now, when it actually comes down to our 120 degrees of field of vision, that's actually peripheral vision. So that's vision that's on the extremes of our left and our right and our top and the bottom. And it's not really in focus. Our general field of view is approximately at 60 degrees when things are in focus. But when we actually do focus in on a subject, that 60 degrees comes down to about 30 degrees. What I want you to do now is a little exercise, is this just to look in front of you and just have a general field of view, and then bring an extended hand with the finger in front of your face with the finger pointing up, and then focus in on your finger and then focus out, and you'll just see how much our field of view changes. Now combine that with the use of a lens in wildlife photography, and depending on the focal length that you're using, you can see that it can be quite difficult to acquire your wildlife target. What we're going to do now is we're now going to look at focal lengths. One of the most important things to understand about lenses is the focal length. A human being's view of the world using their eyes is roughly equivalent to looking through a 50mm lens, which is considered to be a standard size lens for photography. But it's not considered one of the most useful lenses for wildlife photography. But as we will see, it can have its uses for more specialised genres of photography at closer ranges. I would suggest that for wildlife photography, we'll need focal lengths in the region of 100 to 500mm focal length. That's generally determined by how close you can get to your subject and the type of lens you're using. The point to remember about focal length is the larger the focal length, the narrower your angle of view is, and the more difficult it is to actually find your subject through the viewfinder and the lens. Top tip, before going out and just buying what you consider is a fantastic lens, do your research and budget accordingly. If you're a beginner, take your time. There's plenty of videos on YouTube about specific lenses. I'm not recommending one specific lens here. I'm just a hobbyist who loves to go out and photograph wildlife. I started off with a basic kit and then I traded in my lenses to trade up, and I think that's the best way to go about it. So top tip, budget your approach to actually purchasing lenses. When it comes to types of lenses for wildlife photography, there are basically two types. There's a prime lens and then there's a zoom lens. Prime lenses have a set focal length that cannot be altered. So for example, 300mm. Whereas zoom lenses have an adjustable focal length, allowing you to choose from a range of focal lengths. So as an example, 70 to 200mm in focal length. So What are the advantages and the disadvantages of those types of lenses? Again, it can be very subjective. In this table, I've just kind of summarised what I believe are the pros and the cons for zoom lenses and prime lenses. So on the one hand, you can see that a zoom lens, you can zoom in and you can zoom out, whereas on the other hand, with a prime lens, you can't do that. You've got a fixed focal length, so you can't zoom in and you can't zoom out. You then also have the fact that prime lenses generally are better under low light because of their what they call fast apertures. And what they mean by fast apertures is that the aperture is large enough, it's larger than your normal zoom type lenses, and that allows more light in quicker, and that's what makes them faster in being able to achieve focus. Whereas zoom lenses tend to have smaller apertures and aren't as great under low light performance. Now, having said that, some photographers would argue that prime lenses are sharper than zooms. However, there are some zoom lenses on the market that are sharper than some prime lenses. It all depends on what you can afford. And remember what I said about budget. Top tip, telephoto lenses offer you more versatility to be able to zoom in and zoom out onto your subject, whereas a prime lens, it's a fixed focal length and you have to move your position to get closer or further from your subject. If you're a beginner, I would advise you to look at getting a telephoto lens. So what lenses should you have for wildlife photography? There's no easy answer or one-stop solution. Personally, I have the following lenses. I'm not suggesting that you should have this range of lenses, as that's for you to decide within your budget, as I've spoken about earlier. I have a 24 to 105 short telephoto lens. I have a 70 to 200 medium-sized telephoto lens, a 100 to 500 long telephoto lens, and I have an 800mm f11 prime lens. That offers me a good wide range of focal lengths, and for me, focal length dictates how close I can get to my subject, and that's one of the challenges I love about wildlife photography, is getting close. Okay, the first lens that I have is this 24 to 105mm f4 short telephoto lens. It's a useful range for shooting wider views of subjects in the environment or in their surroundings. Nice little lens. My next lens is this 70 to 200mm f2.8 medium telephoto lens. This is more suited for shooting close up to wildlife images. The f2.8 is absolutely ideal for close-up wildlife photography, especially in low light. Because the aperture is so large, it's fast. In other words, it gathers light quicker due to the wide aperture. So 70 to 200mm f2.8, great in low light conditions and close-up. This next lens is my 100 to 500mm f4.5 to f7.1 aperture lens. For me personally, this is my go-to lens. This is the one when I'm mobile and I'm walking about the countryside looking for wildlife opportunities. It covers the short and the medium range of telephoto lenses, and it's considered as anything above 300mm as being a long telephoto lens. So this is really my go-to lens. It's my favourite lens. My final lens is this, and it's my only prime lens, is an 800mm with a fixed aperture of f11. But under the right conditions, this is a great lens. Yes, it does need to be bright and sunny here in the UK. That doesn't happen too often, but when the conditions are right, this is a fantastic lens. 800mm f11. Okay, one other lens I want to talk about are macro lenses. Macro lenses are specialist lenses used for close focusing of smaller subjects like insects and plants, and they're obtainable in both prime and telephoto lengths. The optimum lengths for macro lenses really range from about 100 to 200mm, and they're more suitable for shooting insects, butterflies, dragonflies, and I find that my 24 to 105mm lens is sufficient enough for doing exactly that. So macro lenses are another option of a lens for wildlife photography when we're looking at butterflies and dragonflies and insects. Okay, I want to take a little time out just to give you a look forward to another project that I'm working on at the moment about how to improve your bird photography. And what I'll be doing, I'll be looking at tips and techniques for shooting stunning images. So look forward to improving your bird photography at Kevin Hatley Photography. And now back to the video. Okay, what I want to do now is look at the settings on the lens. Most lenses come with common settings which are important in wildlife photography. So what we'll do is we'll look at autofocus, manual focus, we'll look at the focus limiter, image stabilization and image stabilization modes. When it comes to autofocus and manual focus, autofocus does as it says, it automatically focuses in conjunction with the autofocus mode which you've chosen. I use automatic focus probably 95% plus of the time when I'm out photographing wildlife. Manual focus I'll only really use to pre-focus under difficult contrasting backgrounds where I need to make sure that I can get right on my subject so that the focus isn't jumping, or sometimes for macro photography as well. But the majority of the time, set it on autofocus. The focus limiter. Focus limiter restricts the range that the lens will actually hunt in to obtain focus. Selecting the wrong setting can affect the speed at which your lens actually achieves focus. All lenses have a minimum focus distance, and you need to know what the minimum focus distance is for your particular lens. There are normally 2 or 3 settings depending on the model that you've got, which basically limit the focus to near, far and full, to, in other words, infinity. An example being on my 100 to 500, I can set it to either full, so that the lens will focus the full distance from the minimum focus distance all the way up to infinity, or I can set it to 3 meters to infinity. Top tip, your focus limiter. For wildlife photography, especially birds in flight, where your subject is likely to be far off, setting it to, in this instance, 3 meters to infinity, that allows your lens to actually achieve focus quicker. And in achieving that, your lens will not hunt the full range. So you actually achieve focus quicker by using the focus limiter. So always look to set the focus limiter as you would expect to the conditions that you've got outside when you're looking for wildlife. In this instance, the barn owl, it's way off more than 3 meters from where I am. So setting it to 3 meters to infinity, I was able to obtain focus quicker. And that's the whole reason behind the focus limiter, to achieve focus quicker. One real bonus that's came along with mirrorless cameras and the new lenses that support them is that they benefit from image stabilization technology, which I'm going to call IS from now on, especially at longer focal lengths, which are more difficult to handle due to the length and the weight. IS compensates for the photographer's natural movement, minimizing or eliminating the effect of camera shake. So when you're hand holding your camera, IS is a real bonus, especially for wildlife photographers. But in order to understand IS, you need to understand what a stop is in relation to light and speed. A stop of light is a doubling or a halving of the amount of light let in whilst taking a photograph or an image, and it can be applied to amateur, ISO and shutter speed. In relation to IS, both modern day mirrorless cameras and lenses have built-in IS. It's important that you know that in relation to the lens that you've got. Not all lenses and cameras have the same amount of built-in image stabilization, so you need to find out how many stops of light your camera and your lens can provide you with. If you engage the IS on your camera or lens, you're effectively lengthening your allowable handheld shutter speed by the number of stops that the image stabilization states it will compensate for. For example, 2 stops of IS means you can shoot at shutter speeds that are 2 stops or more slower. The IS switches on your lens, basically you have an on-off, so obviously you need to put it to on to switch the image stabilization on. You then have the stabilizer modes, and in this case you've got 1, 2 and 3. You use 1 if you're photographing a static subject, you use 2 if you're panning with your lens, so birds in flight, and 3 is really a battery saving mode, or used for erratic subjects. So those are the 3 stabilizing modes switches on your lens. Top tip, image stabilization allows you to use low shutter speeds whilst hand holding for longer periods of time. Therefore, you can shoot at shutter speeds that are 2 stops or more slower whilst you're hand holding. And in addition also is that you don't need to use a tripod as much, and therefore you don't have to carry one at all at times. And again, it's all dependent on the light and the conditions. It also allows you to shoot in low light conditions. The last thing I want to look at in regards to lenses for wildlife is teleconverters. Generally speaking, it would seem a good idea to be able to add extra focal length to your lenses. However, it does come with a price. Now, different brands offer different levels of conversion, ranging from about 1.4, 1.6, 1.7 and 2 times. One piece of advice that I would give, and I've picked up on, is that if you want to use a teleconverter, match it to the brand of your lens. So if you're a Canon shooter, use a Canon teleconverter. Nikon, use a Nikon teleconverter. Top tip, teleconverters. Before spending your money on teleconverters, research on YouTube. Go and have a look at the type of teleconverter you want, the size, the make. There's some great reviews there, but my research would suggest that the best option for teleconverters is to use a 1.4. Don't be tempted to just go and get a 2 times thinking that you're going to double your focal length, because the 2 times teleconverters are not as good as the 1.4. That's what all my research and that's what all the reviews say. Top tip, teleconverters, do your research. And if you're going to get one, I would advise you to look at a 1.4 times teleconverter. Okay, thanks for watching this edition of Kevin Hatley Photography and focusing on lenses. I hope you've enjoyed it. All I would ask is that if you liked it, could you hit the like button? Could I also ask you to subscribe to my channel, Kevin Hatley Photography? It doesn't cost anything, it's completely free, and all that does is it just helps me to grow the channel, which is what I really like to do, and share my knowledge and experience with other like-minded wildlife photographers. So until the next time, stay safe, take care, and I hope to see you soon. Bye for now.